Fish on Fridays. I'm Al McCauley. And if you've watched past episodes, you know I love doing episodes about the saints. And I always mention that it's their feast day. And that's what I want to talk a little bit about today is these things we call feast days. The church has populated its liturgical calendar with all kinds of different celebrations. And I think collectively, we often refer to them as feast days. But there is some nuancing to that. And I want to talk about that in today's episode. In fact, there are three different ways we celebrate during the liturgical year, which always starts the first Sunday of Advent, probably right around the end of November usually. And the high point of the liturgical year, of course, is Easter. But all the celebrations that we have throughout the course of our liturgical year all have three different types of celebrations to them. In descending order, they're solemnities, they're feasts, and they're memorials. And again, I think we just kind of use an umbrella term of feast to refer to all of them collectively, but there are differences, and that's what I want to talk about. The solemnity is the highest ranking, if you will, of all these celebrations. It's really the most important, and it really begins the night before with a vigil mass and vespers. So each of these high solemnities have some kind of prayer, if you will, or prelude that leads up to the actual day itself. While we celebrate Mass on a solemnity, there's always two readings prior to the gospel, like we would on a Sunday. Both the Gloria and the Creed are recited. The Gloria may be sung, of course. And what does this incorporate, or what does this include, I should say? All solemnities are every Sunday, so 52 weeks of the year. Every Sunday is a solemnity, as is certain feast days that we call holy days of obligation. And in the United States, we have 6 of them. In Europe, I think in Italy, they have 10, but we have 6 in the United States. So if we go in chronological order from the liturgical calendar, which starts in Advent, December 8th, Immaculate Conception of Mary, Christmas. January 1st, which is Mary, the Mother of God, the solemnity of that feast. If we move on a little bit, we've got the Ascension of Jesus, which is a roving holiday, if you will, or celebration. It moves on the calendar depending on when Easter is. We also have the Assumption of Mary into heaven, and we have All Saints' Day. So those are the 6 holy days I don't think I missed any of them. Those are the 6 holy days of obligation. All of them are solemnities, as I said before, are all of the Sundays in the liturgical calendar. They all fit that criteria. There are a few other exceptions too, or additions to that list. So for instance, there are certain saints who have to do with the life of Christ in particular that we remember as in solemnities. So for instance, March 19th, the Feast of St. Joseph is a solemnity. June 24th, the birth of John the Baptist is a solemnity. So again, these are really, really important feast days. I'm going to use that collective term loosely. These are all solemnities, and they're very important in the liturgical calendar. They're the highest. The second most important are what we call feast days. And feast days, it doesn't mean that they're not important, but they're different. You don't have to have both the Gloria and you don't have to have the Creed at the same time. You can have just one of them at Mass. Feast days don't typically have a vigil before them. They don't have that kind of celebratory tone to them. And they are usually, almost universally, applied to a particular date and a particular saint. So a feast day of my favorite, St. Teresa of Lisieux. St. Teresa of Lisieux is not a solemnity, it's a feast, and it's on October 1st every year. And that's going to repeat itself, like I said, chronologically every year. So that's the second. So we've got solemnity, we've got feast, and then the third one is what we call memorial. Now, the memorials are kind of interesting. There's 2 different types of memorial. There's optional and there's obligatory. And as the names kind of suggest, they're either optional or they're obligatory. The obligatory ones are that's the feast or the memorial that we would want to observe or commemorate something that has universal significance. And it's always a saint. It's like St. John Bosco, whose feast day is January 31st. That's an obligatory memorial. We should remember that. When we go to Mass, we're going to hear the prayers at the beginning of Mass that are going to invoke, if you will, John Bosco, St. John Bosco. The optional form of memorial is something that we don't have to say, and we often don't hear at Mass, and often we don't see on a liturgical calendar. They're celebrated because we don't need to observe them. They're celebrated for a particular country, perhaps, or a particular religious congregation. They're just not considered as universally as significant as other feast days. Again, this is not downplaying those saints in the least. It's just saying that if you've got a special devotion to that person, by all means, celebrate it as a feast, but it's not an obligatory memorial. An example of an optional memorial would be the Feast of St. Blaise, which is February 3rd. And I had to pick that saint because February 3rd happens to be my beautiful wife Katie's birthday. Anyway, so when we look at a liturgical calendar, you'll see solemnities, feasts, and memorials oftentimes indicated just by the letter of their first name. So if you see, for instance, St. Joseph on March 19th, it's going to have an S in parentheses afterwards because it's a solemnity. If you see, as I said before, if you see like St. Teresa of Lisieux on October 1st, you're going to see an F in parentheses for feast day. And then if you're going to see like John Bosco, as I said, on January 31st, you're going to see an M for memorial in parentheses because it's obligatory. If it's an optional feast day, like St. Blaise I mentioned before, every February 3rd, you're going to see no letter after it. I hope that doesn't sound confusing, but it's interesting and it's important, I think, to note that when we collectively as Catholics say there's a feast day today, I want to make sure we understand the nuance of it, that there is, again, a hierarchy of sorts, you know, and the word hierarchy is nothing more than a sacred order. It's a holy order. That's what the term literally means. And so it's our way, our church's way of delineating, if you will, certain feast days and celebrations that we have in the liturgical calendar. That was a lot of information. I hope it's been helpful. I hope it's given you a greater understanding of saints and how they all, interact with us. So that we can all, celebrate with them and one day be with them in heaven. If you're interested, you could share this information with anybody you'd like. That'd be great. I'd love it if you'd subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Facebook. But either way, thank you so much for tuning in on Fridays for Fish on Fridays. Until next time, please be good to each other and God bless.